It's a new week in the Crew Motorfest, and that means we have a new summit. This one is called the Showstopper Classic Spy Thriller, and this is my summit guide. Let's go. All right, before we get into it, huge shout out to Simgii. He's actually helped a lot with these shortcuts and the different lines and NOS management and all that. You can go check out his full summit guide. He posts all his runs on YouTube. The link is in the description down below. Let's get into it. So the cars you're going to need. First, the Summit bundle is the Aston Martin Vulcan. It's a racing car. The Proto Offshore MK1 powerboat and the Pilatus PC21 plane. Now, all three of those vehicles are not fun to use, but I do recommend some additional vehicles that you'll need for the other events, and that's going to be a ground vehicle for Bullseyes. I use the Cento Dieci for this one with Scorebreaker and Skilled, and then I use the Proto WR1 for the boat section of Bullseyes, again with Scorebreaker and Skilled, and then for the plane section of Bullseyes, I use the Zivco Edge 540 V3. Again, you're going to need Scorebreaker and Skilled for that. Now, I also recommend the P51 Mustang. For the plane race that does not have a restriction, you're going to need that with Nitro Chemist and Pure and Extra Pump. And that brings me to the keys to the summit. It's going to be parts. It's parts, parts, and parts. If you don't have parts for this summit, you are going to have a difficult time scoring high, because all of these vehicles and all of these races really rely on the parts that you have on them, more so than the driving. Obviously, the driving does matter, but the thing that's going to separate you from the other players is going to be the parts. Anyways, I don't have any pro settings for boats or planes. I've spent zero time trying to understand the tuning of those two categories, and it really hasn't made a huge difference to me thus far, and definitely not in my summit scores. If you're going for like top world record scores, obviously there's going to be some little tricks here and there, but for me, doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters too much for you either. That being said, I do have pro settings for you for the ground vehicles, and here they are. Alright, the first event is called Episode 1 Double Agent. There are a couple of cuts on this one. Starting at 1%, you're going to cut to the right across the field and up the hill. At 7%, you can cut to the left through the walls and slow down to take that turn. And then at 41%, you're going to go straight across this dirt and aim for the left side of the next checkpoint. If you go wide to the left, you actually can still get the checkpoint and try to stay on the road. I did kind of a poor job on it on this one. At 68%, I use Air NOS and cut to the right of the road. And then again, the same thing at 71%. Use the Air NOS, get through the dirt, get back onto the road. At 78%, you can go straight toward the next checkpoint and reset when you get there. Make sure that you're steering to the right when your car respawns, otherwise it'll just throw you straight into the wall. And that is it for this one. You are home free, just stay on the track. Make sure you're using gutters as best as you can. This car is very bad at gutters, but it is what it is. We all have to use it. All right, the next event is called Episode 2, Escape the Devil. There's really only one cut on this race, and then I've got a little tip for you. At 22%, cut to the left and reset when you get to the checkpoint. Make sure that you're turning left when you respawn, otherwise you're going to go straight into the wall. Now, aside from that, you should be guttering as best you can throughout this entire race. This car is terrible at guttering, and it also understeers. So you got to get two wheels in the dirt to help you with some of these turns, because if not, you're going to be going incredibly slow in order to stay on the road, or you're going to end up in the dirt. Aside from that, that is pretty much it. All right, the next event is called Episode 3, Sea Chase. Now, this event is pretty tough. I have to be honest here and tell you, I really don't know what the key to this event is. I got an outstanding time, and my guess is my NOS management. I tried my best to keep the NOS nearly full by using short taps of the NOS button, and that keeps the boat at or above 190 miles per hour. Another thing is I changed my input for the trim up option to the X button. It would be square on PlayStation, so that the boat is always trimming even in the corners, and I believe that certainly helped. Now, because I'm not 100% sure how the time happened, I think it will be more beneficial for you to view my full run. Enjoy. All right, the next event is called Running Out of Time. My advice for this one is similar to the last one. It's important to manage your NOS. Try to keep it near the top of the tank. That doesn't mean not using it. It just means in the beginning, it's important to let it fill up before you start spamming it. Aside from that, try to shorten your path by going through the side of the checkpoints to create the shortest line between each of those checkpoints. And that goes for the ones that are higher or lower than each other as well. If the next checkpoint is lower than the one you're currently on, make sure you're going through the bottom of that current checkpoint. And that's basically all I can tell you about this race. NOS management, shortest lines possible. All right, let's move on. All right, the next event is called Episode 5, Office of Strategic Services. Aside from simply having a nitrochemist set of parts, this one is basically a repeat of the last one. NOS management and the shortest lines between each of the gates will improve your score. And that's kind of all I can tell you at this point. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. All right, and the last event is called Episode 6, No Time to Rest. And with this one, once again, a pro tip is to make sure you switch your trim up input to a button that can be held down the entire time you're racing. I used X. If you're on PlayStation, it's square. And of course, Nitrochemist with Pure and Extra Pump are super beneficial, but mostly the NOS management is huge. Like I said before, keeping it near the top of the tank by letting it fill up first and then using it in short bursts is going to be your best bet. All right, next let's take a look at the feats. The tips I have for the feats will apply to all 3 of these bullseyes, but I do think it's important for you to see each of the runs that I did, so the background gameplay is all 3 of the bullseyes in order. All right, tip number 1 is to go in the opposite direction on all 3 of these. The points are, for whatever reason, better in that direction. Tip number 2, it's best if you run through it once just to find out where all the best switch points are, meaning when you switch to a different vehicle. And then when you go through it with your real run, you can try to prepare for that switch by clicking your right stick down a little bit early and then tap the button you need when it's time. Tip number 3, the parts on this are super important for all 3 vehicle types. To get the absolute best score, you need to have a set of score breaker parts on ground vehicles, on planes, and boats. And the ground vehicle is sort of your choice, whichever one you have score breaker for. In my case, I used a hypercar. So before you even start these events, make sure that you not only have the score breaker parts, but you also have the affix called skilled on every single part with a maximum percentage on it. And don't forget about your legend points as well. All right, tip number 4, hitting all of the bullseyes is more important than going fast. If you miss one of the smaller circles, just restart the event. And tip number 5, if you're having trouble switching from vehicle to vehicle, you can actually try to do the whole thing in a plane. It's a little bit tough in some spots, but if you're struggling, you may want to give it a go. Or if your vehicle switches are like super delayed and you have trouble, it's definitely worth it to try to do it all in a plane. The other thing is, when your vehicle is switching, you actually still have control of whatever that next vehicle is. So try to control it in between the switches. You can actually see where your car is going to go, or your plane is going to go, or your boat is going to go based on where the middle of your screen is. So try to point the middle of your screen towards the next bullseye. All right, here are my final scores. Remember, you can DM me with any questions that you might have on the summit. I literally answer every single DM that comes my way. That's a genuine offer. If you have questions or anything you really need clarification on, don't hesitate to send me a DM on Instagram, Twitter, or Discord. I answer Instagram quite a bit more than the other 3, or quite a bit faster, so maybe try there first. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope this helps, and I will catch you on the next one. Trigger up.